Hello YouTube, how are ya? It's been a while, hasn't it? I've been very busy in Sydney, catching up with some personal business and not getting terribly much time to come up to the farm. And it was actually the same thing last year and I missed out on the biggest flowering period I really regretted that, but I've managed to come to the Northern Rivers in time for some spectacular flowering. And I've heard from both Peter Fraser and Bruce Chester that unlike 2024, the 2025 flowering season is a long flowering season and not a short one. Now, these trees are A4s in a farm on Lindendale here that I'm just at the edge of, and you can see what a display A4s can put on. Now these trees are rather large for A4s. You could argue they might need a bit of a prune, but what you can't argue is how healthy they are and how much flower there is. Now this flower is yet to open, so it's in its yellow stage. A4 is one of the later ones to flower. We might find some other ones down the track that are already fully flowered or even finishing their flowering. But particularly if you've got a big screen, you can look at the festoons of flowers all over the tree. And look, one day when we finally get the ability to bring you smells on YouTube, we can use the old smell-o-vision and bring you the smell. Now, here's a different tree. This is one of the old Hawaiians, and here's an example of a tree much more fully in flower, but you can see flowers at various stages of development. And the smell is gorgeous. This is the example, if you need one, of the long flowering season and how you've got flowers all in various stages. According to Peter Fraser, that's a good thing for farmers. A long flowering season means greater chance of pollination, much better chance of cross-pollination as the varieties sort of overlap each other. And so long as the rain doesn't ruin the flowering, like we would have got with some of the out-of-season flowering earlier, then the chance of a good season is absolutely on the cards. So from Lindendale, we've come down to Molly's Grass Road in Tregeagle, where some macadamia trees actually lean over the road, and it's a great example of in-season flowering on what looked to be 344s or 246s, certainly one of the older Hawaiian trees. You can see the white flowers everywhere, and best of all, while you won't be able to hear it, I can hear the hum of bees. And so the old bee population is not dead yet. There's certainly some bees interested in macadamia pollen, and that is such good news. Now, I'm going to preface this video with a bit of my other job, and the two questions I get most about it is, what's a barrister as opposed to a solicitor? And also, what kind of law do you do? A barrister is a lawyer who appears in court, and they have very limited ability to act for people outside that. So you can't write letters or do things and say, you know, pay me $1,000 or I'll sue, or even do real estate transactions like a conveyance. That's all a solicitor's job. A barrister goes to court and argues things in front of the judge. So we're the ones who wear the black robes, the wigs, all that sort of stuff. It might interest you to know that we wear black robes because we're in mourning for the death of King James II in 1500 and something. Don't ask me why we're in mourning for him specifically. Maybe he was a nice guy, maybe he paid his legal bills, I don't know. But we're still in mourning for him. So we wear black and we wear wigs and that sort of stuff. All great fun. There's only about 2,500 barristers in New South Wales. There's about 45,000 solicitors. So I was a solicitor for 19 years, and as of this year, I've been a barrister for 14, and I have found my niche as far as non-macadamia farming is concerned anyway. So one of the things I did, and my specialty in both of the arms of the profession, is civil liability. And that is for negligence, sometimes for contract, but it can stem from everything from motor accidents to product liability to public liability. And they sometimes call us common lawyers because a lot of our law is based on decisions of courts rather than legislation. And it's a great field to be working in, a very complex field. Sometimes cases can be very contentious. But in one of my lives as a solicitor, I got the opportunity, I'll use that advisedly, to work for one of Australia's former asbestos companies in handling the claims made against them from asbestos being such a dangerous product. And a lot of people ask me if I needed my head read, why would you volunteer to act for a company like that? And look, there, in hindsight, they were probably right, although, you know, the way our legal system works, everyone needs to be legally represented or else the system falls over. And I thought, well, if I do it, it'll stop someone else from doing it who's even more evil than I am. And it all came to a head where I had this terrible, tragic case of a 36-year-old mum with 5 children. And the only contact she'd ever had with asbestos was hugging her father when he came home from the asbestos mines. And he had asbestos on his overalls, which she breathed in, and at age 36, she was drowning in her own lungs, and I was called to a bedside hearing, and I was the bad guy, or at least representing them. And sometimes people have different difficulties separating lawyers from the clients and lawyers from the system. But, you know, that day I sort of had a difficulty as well. It was a very, very hard task. Upshot was the case got settled reasonably well, and at least some money flowed to her and her family while she could still use it. But terribly sad case. And yeah, to this day, it's the only client I've actually ever sacked. If you all hear about clients sacking their lawyers, it can work in reverse too, and that's a client I sacked. Anyway, long ago now. But what it did give me an appreciation for is that product liability, and particularly dangerous substances, is no joke. I mean, once you see someone drowning on their own lungs, you know that this is real. And you know that when they're talking about taking precautions against a risk of harm, there are workers who just won't take enough precautions. And there's some threshold cut-off point where the product is just so inherently dangerous that even with the best instructions in the world, and even though no harm will happen if you follow those instructions, there's too much chance someone's just not going to obey the instructions and real harm will result. Now, that is the case with Diazinon, which has just been banned in Australia, and you can't use it on macadamias. You can't even use your leftover stock on macadamias anymore. There has been a hard ban. It's been cut off. It's been a long time coming. There was a proposal to ban it back in, I think, 2021 or 22, but COVID got in the way because efforts to dispose of the used chemical and, you know, limited supplies of alternate chemicals during COVID meant that farms would be left in the lurch. So it got delayed a little bit and finally came through at the start of September 2025. So let's have a backwards look in the rearview mirror at Diazinon and why it was banned, because there'll be a lot of farmers watching this channel who've used Diazinon for years. I mean, it's been an allowed chemical all the way through the Australian macadamia industry's history, really, if you start taking it from the 60s. Diazinon was actually invented in 1952, and its purpose at the time was to replace DDT, which was a chemical heralded for its ability to kill malaria spreading mosquitoes. In fact, the inventor of DDT got the Nobel Prize for Medicine, which is a little bit ironic given how many people DDT killed. However, Diazinon was supposed to be a more friendly alternative, less lethal to human health. And so it was brought in 1952. It's been in use ever since then. It was banned selectively by the US in 1996, although some individual states chose to use it. It was used domestically in terms of domestic and garden insecticides. So, home gardeners were allowed to use it. You could use it in non-food areas for cockroaches, mosquitoes, other insects, and livestock farmers used Diazinon for sheep dip until that was banned in 2007 because you could dip sheep and they didn't seem to have any huge ill effects from it, but the people handling the sheep being dipped, there was some admission by farmers at the stage that, look, if you're dipping sheep, some of the product is eventually going to get on the people doing the dipping. And, the concerns with it were multiple. Thankfully, it's never been classed as a carcinogen. And organophosphates, like Diazinon, are strange because they're made up of harmless elements. There's carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, nitrogen. Sorry if I've repeated any of those. But yeah, all these basic elements that a plant actually needs for its nutrition, when you combine it in a certain way, it can make a highly toxic chemical. The way it works and the way any organophosphate works on insects is it shuts down their nervous system. So without a nervous system, the insect dies, can't eat, can't function, basically drops dead. It has the same effect on humans. However, humans, unlike insects, can metabolize Diazinon over about 4 to 6 weeks. It can, however, cause some acute symptoms, anything up to including comas, but in general it can cause shortness of breath, headaches, sometimes affects your ears, can make your eyes pinpoint vision, a lot of neurological symptoms. You can go off your food, and there's a bunch of different things that can happen to you if you've got acute poisoning, and you can get that through breathing it, consuming it, but also through your skin. It will be absorbed through your skin and do the same sort of effects. Over time, it can build up a little bit because it's fat soluble, so it can live in your body for a bit. While you will metabolize it out eventually, it can cause some damage along the way, and it can give you symptoms similar to pancreatitis. So, not nice to be exposed to, and since you can absorb it by breathing it and through the skin, it's quite easily absorbed if you're not handling it with the greatest of care. And a little bit like the sheep farmers and sheep dip using Diazinon, again, it's in theory possible to make instructions that make the use of Diazinon safe, but it's the actual real-world compliance with those instructions that becomes the big problem. And so Diazinon was banned. The way Diazinon works is it's what's called a contact insecticide, and that is you spray it on flowers just like these, and you try and spray it before the flowers come out like this, and you do it when the bees aren't foraging, because it absolutely kills bees. In fact, it kills just about anything, except for things developing resistance to organochemistry. So it's a contact thing that sits on the plant for about 2 weeks. It's active for about 2 weeks. So it's just a poison that sits on the leaves, it sits on the flowers, and it's used in the macadamia industry. It was used to kill lacebug. Lacebug is the predator of macadamia flowers. So it's only around for that time of the year, or it's only a pest for that time of the year for flowering. The problem with, of course, being a contact insecticide is that if you don't kill the lacebug population before the bees start foraging on the flowers, you're going to kill the bees along with it, and that is the last thing we need, where varroamide is out and every bee is even more precious than it already was, and that's pretty precious. So that was its method of working. It's now banned, and the question will now come up for the farmers who have to change their methodology after so many years, what do we use now? One question they might ask is, well, is there still an organophosphate that we can use, but one that's a bit softer? There is one left, and it's sort of on death row itself, but it's still legal for the moment. It's called trichlorphon. Its product name varies depending on which commercial supplier it is. It's well off patent. Lepidex is a common brand for it, and it's still a contact organophosphate. It's toxic to bees. It works sort of the same way. It is a bit gentler though, so it's enough to kill lace bug, but it's not quite so deadly on other things, and it's also not quite so deadly to humans in terms of the safety issues using it. You certainly don't want to be exposed to it any more than you do to Diazinon, but the effects are a bit more limited. Would I recommend its use? Well, look, I can't be a hypocrite. I did use it my first year at Nutkin. It was recommended to me by my agronomist, a little reluctantly, but my farm hadn't been properly managed for many years, and there was a lace bug issue. We sprayed Lepidex before the flowers came out, and we achieved a very good kill of lace bug before the blooming really happened. And because it is a soft chemical, it doesn't really last so well. It didn't, we think, get in the way of the bee population at all. So that's an option if you're still a fan of organophosphates. But really, my argument to you would be, you probably should be waving organophosphates a final goodbye. The social license for using those sorts of chemicals, you know, you could talk to concerned citizens in the villages and mention the word organophosphate, and they will start obviously having a fight or flight reaction to it. You probably don't want to cause those sorts of reactions, and you're better off in a way going with the newer generation of insecticides that will handle these sorts of insects at flowering period. So what have we got in the new generation of insecticides that can replace Diazinon? Well, one is a product called Transform. I'm going to make a meal of its chemical name. I think it's sulfoluxor or something like that. And there's another one called Savanto Prime. They work in similar ways. They're definitely not the same chemical. Interestingly, Transform, you can spray one day and harvest nuts the next day. So if you've got really late dropping varieties where the nuts are still dropping off the tree while the new flowers are on it, the only one you can really spray is Transform anyway, because if you spray Diazinon, you're basically making the nuts left on the trees useless. It's not legal to harvest them and ship them in, because there's a withholding period that's too long. So Transform is what's called, and Savanto Prime, they're called systemic insecticides. That is, you'll spray it on the tree, it'll get in through the backs of the leaves, like this, nice porous backs of the leaves, and it will go through the sap of the plant, and it goes through to, technically speaking, the base of the flowers. So there's a bit of controversy about whether it gets into the pollen, but in terms of the conventional view is it doesn't get into the pollen, but it gets into the base of the flowers where lacebug attacks. The lacebug doesn't want pollen, the lacebug actually wants sap. Flowers are very delicate structures, and it's very easy for these insects to get at the sap through the flowers, much easier than, say, attacking the leaves. And that's where lacebug really does its damage, cuts off all energy to the actual flowers and the pollen and kills the flower that way. Anyway, by having a pesticide that enters the plant, any lacebug that then sucks on the plant sucks its own death. There's also a contact action in the sense that if you're spraying your orchard with Transform or Savanto Prime and it hits the lacebug, it'll kill the lacebug directly. So it is the combination of contact and systemic, although it's really more systemic in terms of getting in there. The advantage of that, of course, is you don't have to rely on the product sitting on the leaves like a sticky mess. So the ideas of using stickers and special oils to try and make the stuff stick isn't so necessary with products like Transform or Savanto. Some will say use an adjuvant to help it mix and help it spray better and help the spray coverage go further. I get that. Sounds like a solid recommendation. However, it's not a insecticide that depends on sitting all over your tree like a coating and killing whatever arrives on it. So it's far more bee friendly than the old organophosphate solutions. The organic solution used to be Pyganic, which was a product made from pyrethrum, and I actually did use Pyganic because there was some leftover Pyganic when I got the farm, and we used that to spray on the trees that were near the residential areas so that you would limit exposure to the residential areas. Pyganic or pyrethrum is harmless to humans. The only and it'll kill lacebug. There's no problems. It'll kill lacebug, but it's just on contact. And if it doesn't kill the lacebug, then it doesn't kill anything. It just biodegrades pretty quickly. Also, very good at resisting little bugs developing resistance to it, because every crop of pyrethrum daisies is slightly genetically different. So so it never really stands still, Pyganic. The only real problem with that is pyrethrum kills indiscriminately. Like it will absolutely murder bees if bees are foraging at the time. So it's really, one of those solutions that it doesn't have the benefit of something like Diazinon, because it can't sit around and keep doing a job on the surface of the tree. And it also isn't systemic, so it can't get into the tree and protect it only from what's trying to eat the sap. And look, at the end of the day, Pyganic lost its organic certification anyway, so I don't know what organic certified farmers are actually now using to stop lacebug. All I know is if you don't deal with the problem, and it's a high pest year, which this year is probably likely to be because wet weather does favour it a little bit, then you lose your flowers, and without your flowers you don't get any nuts. Even though it doesn't look like you're losing all your flowers, it can make them non-viable. So the end of Diazinon, guys. That is a bit of an end of an era for some of you who will be watching this program. I do want to say to you though that the systemics, while they will hurt your hip pocket, and I mean really hurt your hip pocket compared to Diazinon, the systemics do work. The first year I changed over from Lepidex to Transform, the lacebug kill was, it was 100% as far as my agronomist could see. There was just no sign of lacebug after we did a good spray with Transform. And look, you only need to do it once. Even if it rains, just do it once before the flowers come out. The only time you may need to do it at different times is if you've got a combination of A varieties, for example, and other varieties flowering at different times. So you want your 2 weeks systemic protection just before your flowers go from green to white. Because once you've got the white ones, there'll be bees, and when you spray, you'll be killing them. Some recommendations say that the systemic should be sprayed in the late afternoon after the bees have gone home. That way the contact kill, that is the kill from actually contacting the bees when you spray, will be minimalised. That's fine. You could also spray very early in the morning. One of my neighbours sprays at night, so there's absolutely no chance of getting a bee, native or normal. Those are all options for you. So what happens is you spray the tree, the chemical dries, it enters the sap system, and then the bees are relatively safe. Look, Savanto Prime's a fairly new chemical on the market. Are there others coming? Probably. There always will be. Lacebug doesn't seem to build up resistance because it's just too small an insect and too short-lived an insect. So, you know, it doesn't really have the problems that we face with things like Macadamia seed weevil or mites, because mites are little spiders. They're very complex creatures, and they can develop resistance very easily. There is also some controversy overseas, and there are certainly some advocates over in America which say that sulfur-luxor or transform actually does cause damage to bees, and almost along the same lines as the suggestions for an earlier systemic insecticide, where it says that it gets through. It doesn't necessarily kill the bees, but the disruption to their nervous system, enough gets through to the pollen that it disrupts the bees' nervous system, and they can't find their way home. They lose their directional ability, even though it doesn't kill the bee. Now, more research is being done on that, but at the moment, the balance of the research says it isn't harmful to bees. This is what macadamia farmers use, and thankfully, on the critical issue of human health, these chemicals, while you still have to handle them carefully, are far, far safer on the environment than the old Diazinon. So, death to Diazinon, on with the next one. Be interesting to get some feedback from farmers who use Diazinon. How do you like the new systemics? Do you think they work as well? Do make sure you spray enough, because not enough means the lace bugs still have their party. But so long as you do spray enough, and I realise it's going to cost you some dough, how does it work for you? And when you see the nuts set, we're talking about November, will you see the results from it? Will you credit the spray with that, or will it just be a good long flowering season, which is what we all need? Thanks for watching again, guys. So lovely to be back here. Talk to you again real soon.